I've amassed a bunch of parts for eBay GT3582s, your typical like Maxpeedingrod turbo, and I really enjoy them because they put out a real solid amount of power. They don't cost a ton of money. So we've got our used center housing here, but the only way you'd really be able to tell is a tiny bit of rust inside. I ultrasonic this thing, degreased it, put a couple different types of Cerakote on it. So we got a heat shield behind the heat shield on this guy, and then thermal dispersant just for anti-rust on the housing. But let's go ahead and use a upgrade 360 thrust kit to assemble it. Here's the last turbine wheel. Sorry, it's a compressor wheel that came out of this. You can see it touched the housing. So I got a new housing for the front. This wheel all bent up, not going to be usable. But I've got a new balanced turbine compressor wheel with a standard cast wheel. And I've also got a billet wheel for it. I got a couple of these on hand. So I'm probably going to be building two of these turbos, but let's put this one together quick. And before we get started, if I orient this thing in balance, you'll notice majority of the material has been removed here. Similarly, the material removal is in the same place on the front. That's a little bit interesting. I mean, this is right out of an eBay turbo. Typically, where the material's removed, you're going to get, if you watch videos on guys balancing, it'll be like a gram out of balance and then they grind it and it'll be down to like 0.005 of a gram, like just a little bit out of balance still, always. I mean, it's impossible to get it perfect. But typically, you'll see the material removal 180 from each other and not lined up. And that's because the remaining minor imbalance is in sync here. So I'm thinking on my billet wheel, I'm going to do them 180, have them offset. But let's get into it and snap this thing together real quick. First, the bottom snap ring. Got to budge it down a little bit with a pick. So you get those guys seated in their little groove. Helpful to take your pick and try to rotate them. They'll rotate clean in the groove. You know it's fully seated. Front one's a little easier just because it's not as deep down the bore. The back one might be necessary to take like a straight pick and kind of pull it, push it, pop it into its groove. First backside bearing. Compressor side bearing going in. Shouldn't take any force. So I went to install our 360 thrust bearing, but in order to do that, it uses a two-piece collar. So you got the piece that sits below the thrust washer, and then the collar at the end. But I noticed, looks like this collar does not fit my turbine shaft. So I got a 270 style, like a stock style one. We're gonna have to use that. So let's go ahead and throw this in with a stock type 270-degree thrust bearing. These 270s install as like a single piece. So we'll go ahead, lubricate the parts. Now it may be possible to slip this in from underneath when installed on some, but this one it doesn't look like it is. So it doesn't leave us a ton of room to get our thrust bearing bolts in. Things are all greasy. It's problematic for trying to hold on to these tiny parts. And just sinking them down to a comfortable hand tight on these. Bit of a crisscross pattern. And checking them twice. All right, we definitely have some thrust clearance there. That's good. And probably a good time to take our turbine and just slip it through the back as a quick check. So nothing hanging up in there. Feels good. I think we're ready to throw on the front. So this would have been a bit easier if I'd installed it before I put it on the thrust bearing, but for these little piston ring seals, starting at the back with the gap open, just slipping it over top. There you go. So the front of these seals with just a little O-ring. And then our front kind of sealing plate will press down and hold that O-ring in position, keep it all leak free. So just a little bit of oil on the surface that our piston ring is going to slip into. And I like to orient, in this case, you got the drain hole right there. I like to orient the gap upward. I'm just trying to get that ring even. There we go. Now, final piece for the center housing, just our snap ring. Make sure it's seated, and that's all she wrote. All right, time for turbine. So first your heat shield. And I've already lubricated this guy. But we'll I was going to say we'll put some more on, but I think honestly it's totally sufficient. Yeah, why not? Be safe. So just a little bit along the ring, a little bit along the shaft. And then if you can see how the ring is off center, I like to just budge it in. Make sure it's on center around the whole thing. And we're going to try to point that gap up, try to point that gap in the ring up towards the oil drain on this. So oil drain is this side. Gently feeding it through. And get a last look at where our gap is, right about there. That's it. So should be able to rotate this. Yeah. Better than new, I'd say. As I went to go get the 12.10 mil to torque this down, I noticed that there's actually 2 grind marks on the turbine nut here. So it dawned on me that that original cast wheel had been assembly balanced with this turbine. So I'd intended to use this billet wheel, and I think what I'm going to do is put together another one of these. Maybe even make it nicer than this one. So we'll use that in another video, but we're going to go with the cast wheel, the original wheel with turbine and nut, as it's been assembly balanced, and I've preserved our balance marks here. So let me go ahead and final torque this thing. Just going to throw a tiny bit of high strength Loctite on it as well. So I got a tiny smear of the red Loctite on. Just going to get this thing till it almost bottoms out. And then we got our 1 mark there. Bring the wheel into position. So as always, our marks here, hard to see. Our balance marks on the nut are just like a 1/4 turn off our final position. And then in this case, using a 17 on the back. $10 mil on the front. And we're going to find out if that compressor wheel is going to shift. It looks like it might. Yeah, compressor wheel is shifting. So, got to get a little sneaky with it. So now we got turbine, nut, and compressor wheel slightly inside of the nut. Might be a little trial and error on this. All right, looked like our wheel stuck with the nut the whole way without shifting this time. So other turbos, the compressor wheel will stay with the turbine shaft. On this guy, this design looks like your nut and compressor want to stay together. So let's try it one more time. All right, this time with nut and wheel in phase and mark on our turbine. Just need another like 1/16 of a turn out of it. There we go. So now with everything clamped together, final test spin. Whoa. Just our heat shield dragging. Got to find a position where that heat shield's not going to touch. One sec. There we go. And that is definitely better than when it was brand new out of the box. Yeah, this thing is looking great. So it would have been nice to use our billet wheel, but we got this thing back together, ready to make some power. I'll have a part 2 of this when I put the housings on. Probably going to do some porting on the front housing, maybe the rear, some ceramic coating. Make it look real nice, make it perform real nice. And I think that's it for today. I'm getting tired. The part selection fought us at every kind of corner on this one. But, end of the day, I think it was worthwhile effort. And we're ready to go back on the car. So if you liked the video, you got questions, let me know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe.